one time to go over me. Ever.
That's you.
Are we good? Cool.
Did anyone wait? This is going to be like an interactive Q&A, right?
Yes.
Yeah. All right, yeah.
Are you good on recording?
Yeah.
Does that mean you need to mute a mic?
I believe.
No.
Let's pick it up.
Good.
No.
Well,
Yes.
so we changed the structure a little bit.
I can walk around with the mic. And
That's perfect.
Yeah, we'll do that.
But not yet. We're gonna have a little yes. Okay. So, here we go. You know what? Actually, you're getting a very authentic experience.
Yeah, this is how it happens.
Definitely, yes.
I just noticed there was a fuckload of sediment in this wine.
Yeah, Brian talks about the wine. That's important.
I usually have to come in, I need like 10 or 15 minutes of complaining about what happened to me in my job that day before I'm ready to
Yeah, that's like
okay.
usually like exactly what happens.
I get there like a little early and just start bitching, and it's very therapeutic.
So Sam, did you get any emails that you were BCC'd on to get rid of you in your job today? Or?
I did not. No one sent a letter to say that I should be fired this week, so it's a good week. You know, I think I'll take it, but I'll you know, if you know you're doing something right, we don't want to fire you. So.
All right, I'm gonna bring this in. I think we're doing this. Yes. All right. Welcome to Infill, where we talk about local San Francisco politics and policy. And today we also have special guest Laura Lowe from Seattle. And who I have heard is known as the meanest person in Seattle, but is very nice compared to me. So
Yes.
we're very happy to have her. And Sam Moss, Mission Housing.
Thank you.
And Brian Hanlon, California YIMBY, our statewide lobbyist. We're becoming one of those organizations.
Yeah, 15-year-old punk rock me is very upset at myself.
I talked actually when we were in Sacramento with Scott Wiener for SB 35. I spoke with someone from League of Cities and also the trades union, and I said, we have to convince Brian to go full in on the I am the millennial person and wear clothing that represents who he is as a constituent, which means like small hateable hats. And
wait, I do wear cycling caps, and they're small and hateable.
yes. Cutoffs. I'm like, I think this is like going to be like, we're going to have to make sure that you like fully wrap, but you have to wear a tie.
Carry your MacBook around
Yeah, I mean,
all the
well,
time.
I need to get some more guidance from the Senator Hannibal Jackson as to what exactly I may and may not wear when I'm testifying for your committee. As you're alluding to, I was called out for not wearing a tie.
Yep, there's squares up there, but Annie has reassured us that they are unable to regulate women's clothing, so we can wear whatever we want, whereas the men have to be in suits and ties, which is exactly the kind of sexism I like. So I'm very pleased. So today we're going to do a lot of Q&As. We got some people sending us in some questions in advance, but the main thing I wanted to have is questions we get from our family. And us sort of hashing those out and how much we indulge them, because they're the people who, when they ask us maybe the tough questions, I'm gonna put that in quotes, that we feel like we have to fully address and not just walk away from the conversation dismissively, which is what I sometimes want to do. So I can start with my mother's question that she has asked me more at the beginning, but less lately, which is, why can't you just reassure us all that it won't be ugly? And I don't want to answer that one. I want someone else to answer it.
There actually is, I think, a YIMBY design conscious compromise here. One of the presenters at YIMBYTOWN yesterday suggested that, okay, let's say we have the general plans and we state everything is by right. We know what the density is, we know what the rules are, but local neighborhood groups are able to come together and suggest a certain architectural styles to have some say over what the facade looks like of the structures, but it can't say anything about density or parking or height, and certainly not shadows. And while that's not the perfect solution in my world, that's actually, it sounds like it could be workable.
I mean, that would definitely foster that sense of ownership that I talk about from time to time, that if a neighborhood has a sense of ownership about a building, it will be a more successful, more efficiently built. It will come online quicker, They just did that at 3700 California, actually. TMG Partners took almost 2 years with a legally binding agreement from the neighborhood, and they really only got a say in how it looked, not like the height. They predetermined all the different height limits of the buildings and all and like that. And you know, it's not as dense as it could be.
Yeah, you're talking about working in a broken system. Sorry, I hate it. Like, you know, I just think that like we wouldn't have Sutro Tower of, you know, because people at the time thought it was ugly, right? Like,
I agree with Laura. I agree with Laura. So I think that things that are newer scary, like when the printing press was around in the beginning, people were like, it's going to be the end of society, and then the radio and families aren't going to talk to each other anymore, and then the newspaper, same thing, and now it's the internet is evil. It's like, so, or brownstones in New York, or like, we could go again and again and again. The first time I met Sonia, she was showing me all the microfiche things that she had dug up. Like, she was going to the library looking at all the microfiche slides, like in some basement somewhere.
How does that work?
Yeah, she was like very proud of this. And so, yeah, so I think it's the same thing where it's always gonna look ugly, like for a long time, and then it's gonna be like, oh, look at that, that's cool, or that's unique, or it's gonna have some cultural reference, like it appeared in a movie, and then it'll be like beloved. And I don't think that aesthetics are something that we can like crowdsource.
Well, even like the question, how are you going to guarantee that it'll look good? Like, what does that even mean? This definition of
Yeah, I don't like that.
yeah, it was hers. I mean, she likes her definition. Which everyone likes their definition. I like my definition, and she likes hers. It's mine louder.
It's more you were louder.
Okay, cool. I'm gonna cut that. I also I first got involved in this when someone sent me a screed about protecting a little cottage that was originally built as emergency post-earthquake housing. Yeah, and it's like literally.
Is that in the mission?
No, where do you think it's in Noe Valley? Like, come on.
It's got charm, Sam.
It's got so much charm. It was intended to be torn down after 10 years, and then they just didn't. Like, there's no, like, you know, so like, I mean, it is kind of cute, but like also this like definition of like what's good and what's bad is impossible to predict. And like, if you get, I mean, there are ways, I guess, that you could, if you could make it fast, then I would be maybe more for having the ability for people to have opinions about aesthetics. But like the problem with when you start down this road of having opinions about aesthetics is that it's never ending. Like, I also have watched people use it as an excuse. You know, it's often the red herring that they use in order to do like parking and other things that they actually want to fight. They pretend that it's about other issues, and that if we could just, you know, I'm gonna like freaking bring up this stupid project in the mission where there were giant windows that were declared to be like hostily large. And that didn't make any freaking sense. And their solution to the like getting it through the planning commission was to put these horrifically hideous tan barrier things over the windows to make the building uglier, which then made everyone more comfortable with it. I was like, this is crazy.
Yeah, the San Francisco Planning Commission is not staffed by those who have the avant-garde of taste, or even maybe even slightly above the mediocre level of determining what makes this a city beautiful. But like to your point, though, like you're exactly right as to like how the current design review process works today. But the question though is that is there some hypothetical process where we could achieve our goals of sort of, you know, form-based zoning, so like height, bulk, parking, density, all that stuff was agreed upon in like a big plan ahead of time, and then within that framework you provide for community input for the aesthetics. Again, that's like not my preferred outcome. So I think that like what you'll mostly get is what you've seen before. You'll have tons of mission colonial style or faux Victorian stuff everywhere, and it will look kind of ugly and Disneylandish. But again, at the end of the day, I care a lot more about affordable, vibrant cities than I care more about aesthetically pleasing cities. I guess I could always travel if I wanted to see something new.
The one thing aesthetics that and it's not actually aesthetics that I think we should regulate more, is the first story retail activation, the ground floor stuff. Because I do think there's like this fatal flaw with a lot of the modern seeming buildings, the big glass buildings, is that they have no permeability on their first story. And so like the stores and whatnot, and for a lot of the developers, there's no incentive actually for them to make sure that they are full of, so in San Francisco we have a problem in some of our densest neighborhoods where people are out there walking, would be shopping. There's actually a lot of vacancy in our retail. And I think we should maybe do a fine for that, but also like encourage people to take those spaces, but make them better.
Well, so Second Strauss I thought had an excellent idea, which is to get an inventory of these empty spaces, and then to permit the mayor's office of housing or some city agency to basically have like the right to rent at predetermined commercial rental rates, and they could then like sublease that to commercial entities that were being displaced, for instance. In San Francisco, you have a lot of one-story commercial along transit corridors. What we really should be doing is knocking down those buildings and building denser housing, and then replace the first floor commercial. But in the meantime, if you're a business, what do?
18 months is a long time.
Yeah.
Like saying that you can come back is all well and good, and I do think that businesses should have a right to return, but it's one thing to be a resident and to get a relocation fee for 2 years, and someone, the developer maybe finds you a unit, whereas, the business is just supposed to come back in 18 months. Like 18 months is more than an entire business cycle, right, for them, and I don't even know any businesses that could take a quarter off, let alone 18 months. It'd be good to use those vacant spaces to relocate I'll take care of that, I'll handle it.
I want to hear, so this is all like San Francisco stuff. Does Seattle
Sure.
have similar stuff?
Yes,
Or how's it
we're
different?
in the University District near University of Washington, and we have a bunch of vacant retail space on the ground floor, and it's not used, and it's just sitting there, and I hear about it a lot from a lot of people. Can't we do something? Can't we do something? And I've been told all the reasons why we can't. And I'm definitely one of those people that is like, well, we still need to figure it out. And that's something, it's something I get asked about all the time. A lot of the new construction, what we're trying to figure out how to do is to have smaller, narrow spaces. So like instead of one big space, 4 narrow spaces. And Ethan Phelps-Goodman is here at the conference from Seattle Tech for Housing, and has looked into this a great deal about the fact that each space would need an ADA accessible bathroom and plumbing and a back entrance and a front entrance, and so you can't just like have divided spaces.
The commercial space, most dense multifamily tower, whatever developers market, especially. I feel like the commercial space is just this like thing after the fact that they have to build on the ground floor.
So you're exactly right. And so when I spoke to a couple of developers about this idea, they said, perfect, yeah, absolutely. Like it's just a loss for us. We'd be more than happy to surrender this right on a pre-negotiated terms, and the mayor's office of housing or the mayor's office of the new office of commercial temporary relocation, or a much better name than that. That's terrible.
If it's not a good acronym, it's
assume
never
responsibility
get made.
for that. So yeah, I mean, I think it's totally doable. But like most ideas, the problem is that we're not short on ideas. The problem is that like we're short on someone who's going to make this their project and spend. Like, it takes time, like anything else. And who has like the real interest in doing it?
Right.
I think it's either got to come from some YIMBY who's maybe also a small business owner, or maybe was one. Because if you're a small business owner now, you probably have no time to do anything else. In order to run point on this, or convince some entrepreneurial bureaucrat in City Hall to decide that they want to put this on.
Yeah.
Or political movement building around this issue, where you have the pitchforks and torches on our side clamoring for it.
I think the small merchants associations and them might be a good ally. Let's do this.
All right. So we've decided to form a coalition to solve this issue.
Can I say what my mom
Yes.
complains about? She gets mad that I am so aggressive and mean to the quote-unquote white landed gentry because I grew up
Close to Homestead? Is that
because I grew up in Fresno, and she constantly points out that I also was white landed gentry. And she's right, Mom. When you listen to this, you were right. But I mean, the answer to that is because like we're horrible. I hate the white light and gentry. Like they need to be put in their place over and over and over again for as many years as it takes until we can build stuff on more than 1/3 of San Francisco.
So this ties into the fight I had in the hallway with Zelda from 48 Hills, which I'm sure we'll be reading about soon.
She said she's going home to write right now.
Oh,
Yeah, she's worried about how mean I am.
Drove her away. I was supposed to talk to her, but she's supposed to talk to nice Laura.
Oh no.
She should definitely have talked to nice Laura because I was like not having it. So we got to this point in the conversation where she said, like, shouldn't we ask people permission? Shouldn't we ask the existing people permission before we allow more people to come in? But she's like written an article about this, and I was like, no. And also, like, if the system that you're describing encourages segregation and involves the people in the existing communities, primarily white wealthy people who can have the power to maintain what they think of as neighborhood character and have the ability to keep people out. Like, you're describing a mechanism for segregation. And she said, are you calling me racist? Are you calling all white people racist? And I was like,
kind of.
a little. Like,
Did you like choose, like Laura, like did you try to like break down the distinction and maybe just like the difference between like racism and bigotry? So I think this is a thing that a lot of folks don't get, and maybe we aren't the best at describing. There are like racism is about like, you know, power and systems. It's not about like personal bigotry. So like you can say that like, yes, like Zelda, you benefit from a racist system and you advocate for structural racism. Whether or not you are a personal bigot or hold any personal feelings towards any, you know, single group, I have no idea. Now I don't know if that's gonna like make her feel any better.
no, it did not make her feel better. Because I said institutional racism is what the system that you're describing, something like that. And she circled back to, you're calling me a racist, and I was like, you have a choice right now. I was pretty cold. I was like, you have a choice. I have told you that the system that you advocate for is perpetuating institutional racism, and you have the choice right now to either hear that and decide that you care about that and decide that you want to like try to understand what I mean by that and investigate exclusionary zoning as a concept that advances institutional racism. You have a decision, and if you decide to ignore that, that is racism. Like, if you decide to have the opportunity to be educated about that, I would say you are a racist for deciding you don't care about that issue. You are just perpetuating racist institutions, maybe, if you just perpetuate racist institutions, like, without having someone check you, I guess.
I mean, it's in Seattle. I mean, you're having a lot. It sounds like better. You're making more headway in going to predominantly more single-family home neighborhoods, or is it just that there's a larger amount of undeveloped land that can be dense?
Hey, who are you nice to, and why does that work?
So many
And why are you nice?
Well, we're having the same exact conversation that you had in the hallway with Zelda, and it's going the same way. But I don't have that conversation very often because I think there's about, based on the last city council race, there was a particular candidate who ran on a slow growth platform, and another candidate who was running, who the first thing that she did after the election was publish a op-ed, Why I'm an Urbanist. She got almost 80% of the vote, and he got 20% of the vote. So we can ignore that 20% in Seattle, because it's 20% and we have data to back it up. We just had numbers released, there was polling done for the mayoral election that's happening right now, and 50-something% of voters said that they approved changes to single-family zones.
Wow.
So there's polling now to back up that we have a majority. The city's like 55% renters. So that's kind of the motivation for wanting to do a ballot initiative, is knowing that the polling numbers are there.
And I will say there has certainly been some hope in San Francisco. The Balboa Reservoir is a 17-acre empty parking lot that, for the record, never reserved one drop of water in its half-century existence. That's neither here nor there. But three proposals went in, and two of them were around 1,300 units, but one of them was 600 units with a ginormous park that separates the units from Westwood Park, which is a really old single-family home, very rich neighborhood. and I was on a panel about a development in the same area, but not about that particular one. And this like 300-year-old white man who's been around forever, and he's on all the neighborhood groups. He told me, he's like, we just think it's despicable that Westwood Park would ever ask for something as low as 600 units. And so like, I hugged him and thanked him for existing. And so like that, I don't think that really surprised me. The fact that it surprises me is probably also really sad, but there is some hope, is what I'm trying to say.
Lots of
Yeah, I would say like there's a lot of folks. Like the conversation that like you had with Zelda, for instance. Like Zelda styles herself as some progressive radical who moved to Berkeley in the '60s. She owns her home in a detached single-family home district in the Berkeley Hills, which have always been an exclusionary area based on race and class. And for those folks who really develop their strong views about development and community and local control, we're never going to win them. But that doesn't matter, because that is not even most of San Francisco. And now I think it's probably a higher percentage of San Francisco and a higher percentage of Berkeley than it is in Seattle or in Portland. But that is not a majority. What they do have is they're organized at the local level, and these are people who have been organizing for many decades. I think we can beat them, but it is going to take some effort.
There are also people who can show up at 12 noon on a Thursday when the rest of us are working.
Yep. Yes.
All right.
Okay, so Laura Lowe, let's hear the question that you get most from your family.
I mean, if they're baby boomers, they don't even know how to work a podcast. So.
No. They're both librarians, so they're really good at technology. So the first time I went home and told my family that I changed my thinking around housing and started to describe it, it was about a year and a half ago. My father said, "We didn't raise you to espouse these neoliberal values." So it wasn't really a question. And I kind of like, I was like, I know you didn't. And I'm very surprised to have these neoliberal values myself. I didn't know that I had them. So I think that kind of describes what I do in those situations, is I like say like, yeah, you're totally right. Like, that's how I handle all the people that disagree with me, is like, yeah, it kind of sucks. Like, I woke up one day and I was like, what are these neoliberal values that have entered my brain, and what do I do with them? And how do I reconcile them with the thinking that I've had my whole life about dismantling like the system and burning it down that you so generously instilled in me as a child? So I agreed with him, and I was like, yeah, but here was how I got here. And so I think that that's my style, is like, yeah, you're right. Like, just because you live in a single family house, you're not racist. And just because you're fighting for single family zoning, yeah, I'm not calling you a racist. Like, maybe you are a racist. Like, I don't know you that well. Like, I haven't been around you to catch you being racist, But in the meantime, you're like super screwing up our city. And I'm really sad about that. And maybe I've said to many people in Seattle at this point, like Zelda, we can hang out, but we're not going to talk about housing. We can get tea. We can talk about your garden and your beautiful plum tree that's blooming.
What happens
zucchini?
We're not going to talk about housing, because we're just going in circles, and it's just toxic.
Yeah, I've been having a little bit of like a Facebook addiction, getting into terrible conflict. I know.
Yeah.
Well, so, somebody who is very certain that they are correct in their assessment of me and what I do, and who writes these like long essays that I just feel like actually make our points that he thinks make his points. And so I kind of just let them sit there. And then I'm like, well, what about this one little thing? And that makes him even crazier and write even longer things in response. And I don't think that's healthy for anyone. So I definitely feel like maybe the let's not talk about housing strategy is more effective. It's certainly what I tell other people to do. Like, I don't do it. Like, I tell people, like, about the stats, right? Like that people, I think the same thing that you're saying about Seattle, that like there are many more people who already believe this, and like the thing about political organizing is that it's actually not your job to rebut your opposition. It's your job to mobilize your base and get people to advocate for change. And like you can't like it doesn't mean that you're not
I always say
self-critical.
it's our job to make the cool kids table. We want everyone to come sit at our cool kids table.
Or like the other day in the Mission, another nonprofit that's developing housing was suggested by the Mayor's Office of Housing that they meet with me about parking minimums, because apparently I'm known as someone that hates parking enough to like demand that no one ever build any parking in affordable housing. And they came in and they said, well, the North Mission something association is really starting to get loud and demand that we build some parking. I was like, okay, well, like what is loud? Is it 5 people? Is it 10 people? He said, like 5 to 10. We're worried they'll file a discretionary review and make us go. And I was like, they're probably going to do that anyway, so why don't we just spend more time making sure that 40 people show up to support the no parking and just be done with them, because they're never going to be happy. If you build the parking, they're going to ask for something else that they don't want to build. And they looked at me like I was speaking Russian, like it was just, what do you mean we don't work with them? And I was like, some people just, you can't. You can out-organize them and move forward.
Well, and especially when they goalpost move, right?
Yeah.
That's the thing, is like they come, if you address, for some of these things, I want to be a nice person who like recognizes people's concerns, but they move the goalpost with every project, It's like, first it's the shadows, then it's the parking, then it's the like some abstract notion of how they feel about it, and then it's something aesthetic, and then it's, the increased traffic because they don't believe.
I have a really good Seattle example. This one group got together and objected to a building because it didn't have air conditioning. And it was inhumane to live in Seattle without air conditioning. Now, the second summer I was in Seattle, it didn't get above 70 degrees. Maybe so so it's like, yes, you're the goalpost.
That's a new one. I've heard some crazy stuff.
It was inhumane to not have air conditioning. And the fans were going to be really loud. All the 40 fans blowing into their neighborhood was going to make too much noise. Like, this is a real thing. You can look it up. Erica C. Barnett, C is for Crank blog, wrote about it. Yeah, you can read it. It's great.
I got into this argument, Coalition for San Francisco Neighborhoods, which is like the homeowners associations, and they're kind of like often the worst. This guy was like, George Wooding, who like runs it, he's a nice person who advocates for policies I find important. And he was like, I'm just here to defend you all from living in places that are like too small or like not the right fit for you. And I was like, I just looked at him straight in the eye and I was like, please stop helping. And he didn't.
If I could actually, public service announcement just for when we're getting told that units are too small. For the last 50 years, the federal guidelines for affordable 2-bedrooms have never gone, the minimum you need it to be is 750 square feet. So most of the people who are saying we just want this to be bigger so it's humane have for the last half decade been okay with poor people having smaller units. And you don't need to like shame them into it, but I have made a lot of ground pointing out, well, you seem to be okay with low income people even in a unit this size. Is there some particular reason that you're not okay with me living in a unit this size? And it's worked very well. Yeah.
All right, so I want to pivot to Brian, a question that you get all the time.
Well, I don't think I get it all the time, but right, if we're talking about what do our family members ask of us, if they're asking me, why are you trying to destroy my quality of life? Why are you trying to impact me in a high tower? I'm on the lookout for the black UN Agenda 21 helicopters, and this is just too much for me. It's pretty easy to, I think, dissuade that. But it's funny. So today during YIMBYTOWN, we had like a small but noisy protest for a little while. People banging pots and pans. Opposed to our agenda, or alleging that we are a bunch of colonialist, white supremacist, pro-gentrification folks. And that, it sucks. Politics is what it is. There are some unreasonable folks out there we have to deal with. One of the
With
people
some
banging.
maybe valid points, maybe?
Well, so I think a lot of the folks there, as Senator Scott Wiener said, is that the concerns of affordability, the concerns of displacement, the concerns of folks feeling that like neighborhoods are no longer their own are very real and need to be addressed. Even though I disagree with their solutions and I disagree with their characterizations of the YIMBY movement and of YIMBY specifically, it is what it is. That said, like one of the folks banging pots and pans is someone who was very close to me for a couple of years, and it's sort of hard to see this, right? Is to see a person who is part of this noisy protest where some of the chants are "but kill all YIMBYs." I believe
It was worse. It was. I'm just gonna say it was. Sonia Trouse's white baby is gonna die. So that was like for me. I've been in like 40 protests in the last 2 years. I've said a lot of awful things in those protests because you're trying to get news, and the way to get news is to say awful things. But and I don't believe in respectability politics. I think that's a tool for suppression as well. I think that people are allowed to say what they say, but I was shocked. That was the only part where I was shocked. The rest of it I thought was totally legit, like protesting 101. Like, yeah, there's a legislator here, there's news here, like this is where you go when you're trying to get heard. Like all of that was great, but that part was like, okay, I'm not gonna try to talk to you anymore. Like I was out there like with the sunflower, like, do you want my sunflower? And then I was like, no, I don't think I want to give you my sunflower right now. Like that was too far.
Like they're spray painting "Save a Home, Burn a Developer" all over this neighborhood.
But the anger is real. Like
it is without a doubt. No, I don't. I agree. I think.
Like I don't know. I don't like that stuff. Is it's like you're talking about like killing a baby. Like that's I don't know. I guess that's where I draw the line.
Well, this is the thing, like the anger, like how do we think about the anger? Because like I'm here, this is the hard part for me, and this is why I sort of don't try to engage. I mean, I enjoy engaging a little bit, like we came out and gave them fruit and water, because like the thing that's funny for me about gay shame, and especially like Sonia and gay shame and whatnot, is that they don't see us as, and this is for Brian, they don't see us as actually coming from the same emotional place as they are. They have completely othered us. And it's impossible actually for me to other them because they remind me so much of people who I am so close with. And it's like I can't other these people. I actually kind of enjoy their posters of me where I have like crazy dollar signs in my eyes. I think they're fucking hilarious. Like I would definitely do that if I was them.
Right, exactly. That's some good stuff right there. Yeah, those are freaking
brilliant. Yeah.
Antics work. Antics
totally work. But I don't.
Page from that.
Yes.
Do antics.
I didn't love it when they like tried to threaten and like when they like vandalized our office, and like I sort of was just like, like I don't want to give them advice, but like I also think that like I am not opposed to hearing their message at all. In fact, the opposite. I would welcome the opportunity to have actually a full-fledged long dialogue, right. And that's the part that I also feel kind of bad because like I feel like they're used to protesting people who put up the wall and don't want and aren't right, and we're
like in
kind
Seattle with the police when it's like they didn't even show up to like have a dialogue when we had 1,000-something people come to the University of Washington recently with the death of Charlie Miles, and the chief didn't come, and like for legal reasons or whatever. But like it's like yeah, if you're used to protesting people that aren't even interested in dialogue, it's like and we've all I guess been in our lives on the other side of protests, and like it's like I think that it would be great to have at a panel, like let Gay Shame have a panel and talk about why they think that we're a bunch of colonizers and what does colonizing mean from their perspective. Do we have the same definition of those things?
Yeah, I invited them to come and present. This is like maybe I shouldn't tell the membership. I invited them to come present at one of our membership meetings.
Yeah.
They didn't.
Right. So
up on that.
but that's what I'm saying is it's like I always say in Seattle, like we wake up on the same side every day thinking right now someone's getting evicted, right now somebody is sleeping in a tent. Like, we're the same 25 people that show up to the planning, land use and zoning committee. We're the same people that are like living in that mental space from the moment we wake up to the moment we go to sleep, that are like, housing crisis, housing crisis, housing crisis, housing crisis. Like, they're thinking about it as much as we're thinking about it. That's what's so frustrating for us, is like, or for you, that I could see, like, that it's hard to be like, but we're totally obsessed with the same crisis. Like,
But the thing is,
Yes.
though, I mean, look, I think ultimately, sure, very long, sustained engagement could yield some benefits. That is a really long, really sustained engagement, and quite frankly, that is not the best way to spend our time if we're looking at growing a political movement and if we're looking at achieving actual victories. And so while I think that Laura Lowe is exactly right, that the concerns that animate these protests, we do need to address. And not only address, but we need to think of solutions that don't just indirectly help ameliorate those problems, but maybe more directly address them. But I don't think it makes sense for YIMBYs to start spending 10 hours a week per person to try to find like adopt a gay shame best friend, because that's 10 hours a week that you're not organizing other folks, that's 10 hours a week that you're not lobbying your legislators, that's 10 hours a week that you're not doing anything else, and I just don't think it's worth the effort.
Yeah, no, it's totally not worth the time. I do think that for me, there would be emotional benefit for me personally.
To disengage?
No, actually, to like,
to heal it, to have some healing and like not have it be so like toxic.
Mm-hmm.
Like the toxic nature of this work needs to burn out, and like I was getting at that yesterday.
It's exhausting.
I hear a lot of affirmations from our audience on that one. And so when you can like take the toxicity down a notch, then maybe that buys you 6 more months of doing this work unpaid or something.
which is not what they want. You know, I mean, like, I think it's a valid strategy. This is it's not what they want. They want to make sure that it stays super toxic because they are, are there more effective ways? I feel like I should consult with them and be like, here are like effective ways that you could advance your policy goals. And then I'm like, I definitely shouldn't do that.
A lot of them
I'm going to keep defending. I'm going to be the gay shame defender today. So we wouldn't be having this conversation if they hadn't had a protest, and we wouldn't be discussing these issues, and we wouldn't be talking about colonialism in this podcast today. So they've done their job, and they've done it right, and they've done it well. And by saying ridiculous, awful, horrible things, they've gotten us to change and pivot to this conversation. So as somebody who protests quite a bit on quite a bit of issues and says a bunch of ridiculous stuff to get attention in those protests that have nothing to do with housing, they've we're kind of proving their point right
Well, I'm going
now.
to push back on that. I mean, one, I think this, I brought this up just because I had a personal connection with one of the protesters, and a lot of the issues that they do address, these are issues that Bay Area YIMBYs that do talk about quite a bit. We do talk about look, it is not the case that if we just streamline housing productions and upzone housing in San Francisco, that displacement is all of a sudden not going to be a thing. It is. So these are issues that we're already thinking about and already working on, and not just on our own, that are already working on with, Sam is here from the ED of Mission Housing, a nonprofit housing developer and service provider. I'm working with low-income advocates in Sacramento for more specifically tailored interventions into protecting vulnerable tenants. So that's already happening. I don't know.
Wait, I want to push back to the pushback to the pushback.
Just say your pieces now.
I think that actually they picked their enemy maybe pretty well in us, because I think that pulling these two thoughts together, we are way more susceptible to wanting to be open to their message than the average person that they protest. Most people that they protest, as far as everybody from David Campos to Scott Wiener, they have picked somebody who's in politics and has a PR firm that tells them to shut up.
Right.
And they when they picked us, actually we engaged with them pretty thoroughly. We talk about what they're what they feel. We openly spoke about when they vandalized our offices. We process their interaction with us pretty publicly, and I definitely agree with you, like, as far as like productive protest mechanisms, like I think Laura's completely right about saying that like we actually help amplify their message, and maybe I don't necessarily
maybe
have
we'll
a
get the
problem with
solutions that they don't have, like the community power to get, and you guys have the community power to get the solutions, and maybe it's like a weird way of agreeing with us to protest this.
Ooh, I like that.
That's funny. I mean, I would just like add on that, and I think it's a fair point. One of the reasons that we're more susceptible to hearing these messages is that many of us come out of those more radical communities. Like Laura, like I know that like you, Laura Lowe, were engaged in all sorts of like radical political action, and even some like anti-market rate housing stuff before, right?
A month ago.
Yeah. Right. So I mean,
I marched in a displacement stops here rally in the Central District.
Yeah.
Not that long, maybe like 3 months ago. So.
And like I like that's how I got my start in housing politics, was going to anti-eviction protests in the Mission. So I mean, I think like they pick their enemies well in the sense that, but in some sense it's more toxic because a lot of them I think view us as apostates. Like if we came out of a certain radical milieu and then all of a sudden they're advocating for things that they find are important, it's not just that we're wrong, but that
it's like my father.
We delegitimize them. Yeah.
Yeah, it goes back to what my dad said. Yeah.
Exactly. I would love to. I mean, this is the sad thing, right? I would love to be able to talk to them and say, is your perspective on this like a sort of like noodling over this with them would be super fun. But they've told me to fuck off repeatedly, so they don't seem interested.
The more radical folks also don't think in terms of policies. Like these people have never read a white paper. Like they don't like this is just.
Okay, but don't. No, I'm gonna like push back the third word. Like we cannot be the kind of assholes who are like, you've never read a white paper,
yes.
so you can't like have a political opinion.
Yes.
Like I don't read the white papers you send me. Like.
I don't know. Is very true. My point wasn't that you have no right to engage in the political process if you don't read 40-page white papers. That's only a certain segment of the debate to. But my point though is that I think there's less. If we're talking about like you mentioned policy, like policy is not the common ground in which to engage those folks. Like those conversations will just not go anywhere at all. Like maybe like if it's like more like about like values and ultimate things that we care about, and maybe more importantly things that we hate, I think that could be more fruitful. But like it's not like a policy conversation right now.
I think it's totally fruitless actually. The values conversation, and maybe, I don't know, Laura might have a different thing, but like
This is not my city, so I don't know all the stuff going on. And I don't know all the steps that have happened before today.
It's been terrible. So, like the struggle that I have all the time is I say, these are my values, this is why I think what I think, and instead they're like, you're a liar and you're a scam artist.
You co-opted our language.
Yeah, I co-opted your language. And I was like,
That's a good one to make people feel guilty.
I was raised in it, right? Like I was like raised in social justice language, and it is like it's like some of the first language that I reach for when I'm talking about political activism, because like that's what I was raised in my like school and whatnot. It's like it was like a very like, especially as the older I've gotten and the more I've gotten outside of the bubble, your like lower middle high school bubble, the more I get out in the wider world, the more I'm like, oh, like you didn't, like there's all these people who like still celebrate Christopher Columbus. Like I thought we were sort of not doing that anymore. And then like, no, like we really, like culturally America was super still are. And so like I mean, this resonance I have with people who speak the social justice language, and they definitely accuse me of co-opting the language. And I don't, like, what can I say?
But I would say like, it is nothing in terms of the amount of time that would make sense for us to engage. But this is some like counterfactual universe where the YIMBY movement decides to stop trying to be effective and just start trying to all these folks, which really do not do that. It's a terrible idea. Like I think through sustained engagement,
No, I think results is going to be the only thing that shuts them up. So it's going to be something that they're just like, oh shit, they like did something that we've been trying to do forever, and they like did it, and they did it 10 times better than us, and they like totally like got like homes for all these people or whatever it is that they're like, oh man, like we feel stupid, like they actually did this amazing thing. So it's going to be like a result.
Everyone get ready for our ballot prop.
Yeah, that's gonna be great. So I think we could probably pivot away from talking about this.
Yeah.
Should we do some,
I think
questions?
questions from the audience.
Okay.
Do people have questions?
I'm gonna walk around.
Hi.
But Laura, you gotta get in here.
Yeah, I'll bring it back to her. Boback, long-time listener, first-time caller. I always debated whether or not I want to ask this question, and I'm close to a lot of you, so I feel like I've talked about this in bits and pieces offline already. But the question I have has to do with a piece of, I got involved with this stuff in 2015, and you know my story. Laura dragged me to some committee hearing for affordable housing bonus program a time ago. But I only recently, like in the last 8 to 10 months, learned about urban renewal. I learned about, for the first time, everything that happened in the 50s and 60s and the wholesale destruction of neighborhoods in the name of development, and what the people who are now much older today, what they are fighting against with us, presumably because of their fear that we're going to go back to urban renewal. So I'm curious, I've learned a little bit about this privately, but I'm curious if you want to talk about it publicly, like, how do we push past the fears of urban renewal 2.0? Because I don't think we're pushing urban renewal 2.0. I think we're pushing something much different and something much more holistic and productive and collaborative, but I think people have fear, a lot of fear. So that's my question.
If I may, as someone who's been told to stop bringing up redevelopment in conversations by
Final
Laura.
say. Okay.
Okay, so I think the best way to do it is to show the type of buildings that we want, at least from the affordable, like 100% affordable perspective. And this does take bandwidth and time, but when Mission Housing wants to go build in a neighborhood that perhaps hasn't had a lot or any 100% affordable housing, and when it's important to remember that the baby boomers and even some Gen Xers, when they hear affordable housing, they think public, giant concrete towers that were built to keep those people in and away from the good everyday citizens, for lack of a better term. And my industry hates that just as much as anything else. But when you figure out, when you come to the realization that that's what they hear, that's what they think when they hear affordable housing. You can attack it in that way. So Mission Housing, I mean, I love nothing more than to give like walking tours of the Mission with people from those neighborhoods. In Forest Hill, a neighborhood in San Francisco where Christian Church Homes wants to build 150 low-income senior units. I mean, you'd think that the world was ending out there, but the San Francisco Housing Action Coalition organized a Saturday van tour. There were 3 different vans. We went to 3 different sites. I sat in a different van each time, and to be frank, the most productive part of the tour was the van ride after each building, where I could explain like what went into building it, how it's union labor and it's staffed every day, and these are the services we'll provide, and this is the architect, and they were genuinely surprised. They were literally, they thought that we were going to go tour like the towers in The Wire. That's what they thought we were going to go see. And once you come to that realization, I think that a lot of the negative emotion is taken out and it becomes more objective. Like, no, you're just mistaken. That's okay. I get why you're mistaken, because literally the federal government ruined the world, to a certain extent, and you lived through it. So that probably sucked. But we've been attacking it objectively and not with emotion, just with like proving them wrong with physical examples.
I want to hear from Laura Lowe, because I feel like you're going to have a complicated, because redevelopment.
But nice.
Yeah.
So Seattle's really interesting because we have redevelopment going on at our new transit stations that are going to open up. And this one community got together and wrote an angry letter about how there wasn't deep enough affordability in the building. They wanted deeper affordability. And this is the same neighborhood that like 10 years ago asked for the station to be moved into the heart of the community and asked for a couple of extra floors. And I don't know I still think it goes back to the fact that we have Mount Rainier and we have the Puget Sound and we have all of this wild space so close to us, so close, like, 30 minutes, 20 minutes away. You're just in the wilderness, it feels like. And so people are really in this mindset of like, okay, let's do density correctly and right, and like let's make sure that a bunch of folks that are on Section 8 housing can have access to this light rail station that's opening up in a few years. So a lot of that work was done a while back, but I think it goes back to that strong growth management act, maybe, or just the love of nature, or knowing that, I don't know, there's not a lot of people objecting to affordable housing on aesthetic grounds. There's a new project that just opened up, or is going to open up in a park. And this is the first time that I've really seen objections from a very small amount of people saying things like, we don't want more crime. But that's super rare. And it's a
standard operating procedure down here.
right. So this is a super rare thing.
It's really liberal.
All right, wait, I want to address, I think, more forthrightly Paul's question about the fears of people that what we're doing is abusing displacement. Not just the fears of the people that Sam is allaying, that we're not building crime towers to rob your children as they go to the bus stop. Of course, we don't have school bus in San Francisco, it's an issue. Look, I think that the first thing to do is to know the history and to acknowledge it. And so thank you for doing that. Like, this is a line I use a lot. When James Baldwin referred to urban renewal as Negro removal, he was correct. All throughout the United States, with money back from the federal government, we demolished entire neighborhoods, displaced people. It depends on the era, but like mostly all poor people, mostly black people. And if you look, we're recording right now in Oakland, a few blocks that way in City Center, totally demolished. If you go down through West Oakland, and if you look at the construction of the highways, the construction of BART, the construction of the big post office facility, they used actual World War II surplus tanks to drive through those old wooden Victorians and demolish them. That symbolism was not lost on those residents. And there are still people around, older folks, they remember this. This isn't just history for them, it was their fucking house that was destroyed. And so I do think it is very important to know this history, acknowledge it, but to talk about how what we're doing is not all that, right? And it is reprehensible that some so-called affordable housing advocates in San Francisco talk about how our agenda is that of ethnic cleansing, is that of urban renewal 2.0. That is not what's happening. We are not looking to empower the state government to kick people out of their homes, to demolish those homes, and then to scatter them to wherever. Because while many of the folks that Sam is having to manage their fears, what they remember is the aftermath of urban renewal, like the new towers for below market rate housing that were in other places. We never built nearly as many housing units as we destroyed. It was it really was flat out population displacement. And so that's real. But I think that we can talk about our agenda in a way that, one, it's just nothing like that. There is really good evidence, including from the Urban Displacement Project at UC Berkeley, that neighborhoods, even low-income neighborhoods, that see more market rate housing development see less displacement. And part of the ways to prevent this is, one, don't kick people out of their homes. That's step one.
Yeah.
But step two is, in certain circumstances, you could imagine that, okay, at some point you really do kind of run out of developable land. We're not there yet, so don't let anyone tell you that. But at some point you do, and then you're like, well, some places that are single-story commercial retail with one-story housing top, we actually probably should demolish that and rebuild it. That said, one, I'm not at all convinced that that should be enforceable, that the city government or the state should come in and do that. Two, fuck right of return. How about a right to move into a place immediately? Yeah. And there's a way that the city could manage that if we're actually going to engage in any program where we have to demolish tenant occupied housing, that they get a place to move in the same day. like, there's no right to return. Is it like a right to people have heard that story before and it has not worked out. And I wouldn't blame anyone for not believing that.
Right to return was a redevelopment like buzzword.
It was a promise.
It was promised.
Right to return after your entire life has been destroyed for, 18 months if you're lucky, like it's going to be more like 2 or 3 years. So two things I want to, like, one thing that I think, we are tenants and we're pretty strong tenants activists, and like, I think that one of the potential solutions is making like buyouts that you have strong enough tenants protections that in order to get somebody out of an existing unit like that, you would have to like potentially get a massive buyout or be offered or something like that. And I think that's great because like also if somebody's deciding to take that buyout, then they might make other choices too. They might decide to go back to school. They might decide to invest in a small business. They might, like a buyout might be a great option for that person, so long as they have the ability to leverage it and actually get the buyout that they deserve.
I was living in an 8-unit building in West Los Angeles, going to UCLA, and I was graduating, and the building was getting demolished to make way for, instead of 8 units around a pool, it was going to be like, I don't know, a 6-story apartment building. And I got $2,000, and I felt like I won the lottery, and I decided to move to Chicago, and like that $2,000 totally changed the
You should have held them up for way more than that.
Another couple in the building got like, like $40,000, $50,000, so you could go all the time. But that money it changed it totally. I used it to move to a different city even, and it wasn't. I wasn't displaced out of Los Angeles because I was displaced out of that building, but it could statistically look like that.
Yeah.
And so that's something about statistics is like that doesn't tell the story of like that I like went on this new cool journey and adventure because of that money.
So I want to circle back a little bit to Bobak's question of like onboarding actually is what I think that is also a question about. And I think that's something that like we were growing too quickly to like educate our members for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And we do this whole thing now that I like want to recommend that every new YIMBY group do, except that I can't really because we didn't, and so like I don't know what to do about that. Which is like we have these like intro YIMBY 101 things where we're like, this is redevelopment, and these are like basic things that you should know about, and like making sure that your membership doesn't sound like idiots when they open their mouths, that they have those tools and whatnot to know what they're talking about, rather than just having the like instincts to be like, housing too expensive, more of it cheaper, right? Like I want to give them more historical context than that. So that they understand, when they're talking to somebody, like why would someone, because I struggle with like, how do I talk to somebody who feels like building more housing is going to make things worse? I can't always, and so, it's, you can have an endless conversation with them, but you should at least understand and not just be like, that person's an idiot. You should like be able to understand how and why they have come to the conclusions that they have come to, and have that kind of humanity to be able to hear why it is that they've come to what, suckily are wrong conclusions.
So I think that was a very long answer to your question, Bob.
We have to ask.
So like we should ask more questions.
Oh yeah.
Okay, more questions. Who has a question? Especially someone from a community that doesn't always get their voices heard. Like in urbanism, often women's voices aren't heard. So I'm just gonna wait a minute to see if anyone that identifies as a woman wants to speak, even a member of the press.
I just have a comment.
Okay, you gotta take that.
I have a comment, quick comment, and it's because, as a member of the press, I like to hear all sides. And when I walked in, there was a protest downstairs, and I tried to talk to someone, and they wouldn't talk to me. So the idea of amplifying the message, the idea of they're trying to expand their message by being that crude, I don't understand, because I represented myself as a member of the press, and I wanted to understand what it is that they're saying, and so nobody would talk to me. That was the only comment that I wanted to.
Because you're a member of the system.
Yeah.
I am part of the system.
You look just like the system.
But
That's what I think when I look at you.
I am a Puerto Rican woman. My friends say I have white passing privilege, so unfortunately, some people don't want to talk.
So we're gonna sort of round it up unless we got one more that could be super quick.
Anyone can ask a
Okay.
question.
Eventually.
Eventually.
Thank you so much for all the conversation that's happened. I found it extremely enlightening and fantastic to listen to. I'm from Vancouver, BC, and one of the huge narratives there is foreign investment. A lot of Chinese money tends to come over to Vancouver and empty homes. So you like the idea around building more homes, even if they're affordable homes or maybe below market, but they're not reserved for under any program, is that they're purchased and then left empty because someone's just stashing money there. And it does happen for sure. And I'm wondering if that's a narrative that you deal with in your respective cities and how you manage that, what programs how you advocate around that to ensure that homes are for homes and not investment, because that's a huge barrier that I come up with, and I don't know enough about our financial system in Canada to actually know what to do yet. So I'm just curious as to what you do in your respective cities.
I will say, just from the affordable perspective, in San Francisco at least, and I do believe in New York also, when a market rate development builds on-site below market rate housing, right? We're gonna build these 100 units, but 15, 20, 30, whatever of them will be for low-income people. The Mayor's Office of Housing, so they sign what's called a deed restriction that's legally binding for those units for between 55 and 99 years. And the Mayor's Office of Housing oversees the lease-up or the sale, and then every year the Mayor's Office of Housing does what's called an income certification, where they meet with the tenants and they make sure that everything's okay and they recertify their income. And you don't get evicted if you make more.
It's a lot of work, is what he's trying to say.
Yeah,
and
but
there's
I'm just
definitely a
saying it
human
is
in the affordable ones.
possible. It is possible to at least make sure that the affordable units are for people and not just for investments.
But like, I mean, so I don't know. I'm no expert in Canadian tax policy.
Agreed.
But I did.
But you guys just passed a vacancy tax, which we should do.
I did read an article about it once, and my understanding is that was an entirely predictable effect of like not only a sort of mainland Chinese desire to escape capital controls and like move money out, but also like it was like a very incented form of investment from Canadian tax policy. More than that, was like, look, there like this rhetoric that goes a lot in the Bay Area. We have a very long history in the Bay Area of worrying about the yellow peril. Indeed, depending how you count it, the first land use restrictions in the United States were anti-Chinese restrictions in San Francisco. So there's a lot of really ugly rhetoric out there that has no basis. There are undoubtedly some units that are purchased that aren't getting built. Now now I think the numbers are smaller than I would admit, but let's imagine that they are and they're empty. So what? If these are new condo towers in San Francisco. These are good union jobs. A bunch of working people made good money building them, and they're getting money for infrastructure improvements and everything else. And if they're not using those units, they're not using any tax resources. It's a big win for the city.
Okay, I'm gonna totally disagree, but we don't have time. So we're gonna have to pick this one up on the next episode of Infill. Canada passed a vacancy tax in Vancouver. I think we should do it here. We will have to wrap this up.
Yeah, I just want to say thanks to everybody. It's the first time that everyone's drank with me.
All right.